My claws fell off.
And you could have it all. My empire of dirt, I will let you down.
Logan is directed by James Mangold, the same guy that brought you The Wolverine, the very good Wolverine movie, not X-Men Origins Wolverine, the really crappy one. This movie stars Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart, and this takes place in the future of the Days of Future Past timeline. This movie takes place in a time where mutants are basically extinct. When they got rid of the Sentinels in X-Men Days of Future Past, that didn't save the mutants for long, because eventually they still went extinct and it was still a big problem. And Wolverine and Professor X are basically some of the only mutants left, and they're together. Logan's trying to take care of Professor X, and they're basically the only mutants left. They basically lost all hope. All the mutants are dead. They've lost everything. Wolverine has actually aged, which is something that I won't reveal how that happened, but it is something in this movie. He's an old man Logan. But while Logan is trying to take care of Professor X, they end up stumbling upon this girl who's also a mutant, very similar to Wolverine, and they have to take care of her, and a lot of circumstances happen with mutant stuff, and yes, it's Logan. This is another Wolverine movie. So guys, Logan was one of my absolute most anticipated movies of this year. I'm pretty sure this was my second most anticipated movie of the entire year, under Star Wars The Last Jedi, honestly. This movie looked incredible from the trailers. The trailers really hooked me. I'm a big fan of the X-Men franchise, and Wolverine, aka Logan, you can see I have a pop figure of him here. He is my favorite X-Men character. He's one of my favorite superheroes of all time. He's one of the best superheroes to ever exist, and I love this character, and this movie looked like a very dark, different comic book movie, and I was like, yes, this is what I want. And guys, I am not kidding when I say this. Logan is one of the best comic book movies ever made. This movie absolutely pleased me in every single way. This movie was incredible. You need to see this movie right away. If you thought The Wolverine, directed by James Mangold, was a depressing movie, yeah, you haven't seen anything yet, because in this movie, Logan and Professor X have lost everything. They basically lost all hope. Professor X, who's usually a very wise guy who has a lot of hope in the world, he is kind of tired of everything. Logan and him are tired of dealing with life. They are through so much pain. They are at the lowest of lows in this movie. Remember when I reviewed The Wolverine leading up to this movie and I said that Hugh Jackman in that movie is the best he's ever been as Wolverine? Yeah, well, I was wrong. This is his best performance as the character. This guy is so good in this movie. If I was in charge of the Academy, which I know they will never do this, I would nominate Hugh Jackman for Best Actor right away. He is incredible in this movie. This is one of the best performances of a superhero I've ever seen in my life. This guy is at the lowest low that he's ever been. He is old. He's tired. He's torn apart. Everything in his life has been stripped away from him. He is going through so much pain. And it's really heartbreaking to see the character of Wolverine go through such a low in this movie, because he goes through such bad things in this movie, and it's really heartbreaking to see him deal with all this stuff. Patrick Stewart in this movie is also fantastic. I love this guy so much. Again, as Professor X, he's so good. Both Professor X and Wolverine in this movie are very different than they are in the other X-Men movies, because Professor X and Wolverine both have no hope left. Like, basically Professor X in this movie doesn't want to deal with life anymore. He's very different than the Professor X we've seen in the past. Patrick Stewart also had a lot of funny moments in this movie, because this movie isn't all dark and depressing. There is a few funny moments in there, and Patrick Stewart really sold that. He was really good in this movie. This movie is basically depressing and bleak from start to finish. This may be one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen. This movie is so dark. It's such a heartbreaking thing to see these characters in their last movie together. It is so heartbreaking, and this movie, it doesn't hold back. The action in this movie is brutal. I'm so glad that this movie was rated R. I'm so glad they didn't go for the PG-13 route, because this movie is absolutely brutal. The action in this movie is some of the best action I've seen in a comic book film. It is insane. Wolverine has claws, he's decapitating people, he's clawing people up. It's so violent. Do not take your kids to this movie. This movie is so violent and I loved it. It was so dark and great. The little girl in this movie that I forget the name of, but she is fantastic in this movie. This is a really good child performance. She reminded me a lot of Eleven from Stranger Things because she basically didn't really say a lot of things. She rarely talked and she was fantastic in this movie. I loved her character. This is a really good child performance. This movie also does have a lot to say about discrimination and prejudice against mutants and things that actually happen in real life. Like, that's been a theme in a lot of the X-Men movies, but it's never been explored to this harsh of a level. It is insanely depressing what they go through in this movie, and it's a really good theme as well. This movie has very good themes behind it. Guys, Logan is easily the best X-Men movie I've ever seen. It's even better than Days of Future Past. This movie is incredible from start to finish. I loved all of it. It's violent, it's brutal, it's depressing, it's very different as well. This movie makes a lot of very ambitious choices that were very risky and very ambitious, and I loved it. This movie is one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. It's the best X-Men movie. It may be even better than Captain America Civil War. This movie is absolutely incredible, and Logan absolutely gets an A+. Guys, I'm so happy with how Logan turned out. This is my first A+ of the year. I only gave out 5 A+s last year. This movie is incredible. It's one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. If you're a fan of X-Men, if you're a fan of Marvel, see this movie immediately. Right, guys, if you like this video, be sure to like it, be sure to subscribe, be sure to comment your thoughts on Logan below if you saw it in the comment section. And be sure to check out my reviews of the other Wolverine movies that I did leading up to this, like X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Wolverine. I did those leading up to this movie. Be sure to check that out. And yes, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.